Welcome to today's lesson on creating a value scale in color. This video will be focusing on the use of watercolors, and you will need a few things as you get ready to begin your work today. 1, your paintbrushes. 2, a single pan of watercolors. You'll also need a water cup and some paper towels. Feel free to pause here and then come back and join me when you are ready. Welcome back. Now that you've got your things and are ready to begin, let's first review what is a value scale. A value scale is a tool that artists use to help them practice and learn how to control a new medium or a particular medium. And so in this one, you will be creating a value scale on your sheet from your packets. But first, let's take a look at an artwork that uses a gradient and uses value within one color using watercolors. Here you are seeing an example of an artwork that shows gradients or gradual changes in light to dark. In watercolors, this is done by first starting in the background with your lightest valued areas, because once you use watercolors, once you go dark, you can't really make it much lighter. You can always, however, add more pigment and make it a little darker on top of that. In this particular image, you will see that the background was painted first with a gradient in blue and moving lighter as it heads down towards the horizon line. The mountains were then painted in next, a little bit darker, coming forward to a final foreground where the trees have been mixed with black to be the darkest area in silhouette with the moon. The whitest areas you see are actually resisted, but we'll talk about that in another video. Here we go. Are you ready to begin? I hope so. I'll see you at my station. The most important thing that you would want to remember about using watercolors is going to be the difference in between it and using something like, for instance, tempera paint. When you're using watercolors, you are going to be working more with the ratio of pigment to water than even adding white. You actually don't need white to make a tint in watercolor. For that reason, we're going to start with our lightest colors. And then we're going to work our way to the hue and then to mixing the shade. So when mixing these, it's important to have a clean palette. You always want to keep and have your lid clean. So it should be clean when you leave the art room. It should be clean for the next person to come in, and it should be left clean for you. So this lid is your space to mix, and that's going to be your best friend. Like I said, we're going to start here with the lightest value and our lightest tint first. So I'm going to begin with just adding some water into my lid here. Move this so you can see me mixing. And I'm just going to do a quick swish into, let's say I'm going to do red. I can even test this out here and see if I think that'll be light enough, which I might need just a little bit more pigment. It's nice and light, but that was a little too light. The thing to remember about watercolor is once you go dark, you cannot lighten it back up. That's why it is important to start with these lighter tints first. Oops, there was a little bit of green in my tray. Let that dry. I'm going to add a little bit more water up here. And to get ready for my next tint, I'm going to give it another swish, and see that water's been sitting in there, and so it really gave me a good amount of that red first this time. So now I can go to my second tint. And I can see what I get. The problem with this is I really should be working on watercolor paper. This water is just kind of soaking in there, so I'm not going to be able to see a whole lot until this is all dry. Now I've got plenty of water up here, So for my next tint, I'm just going to go ahead and get another swish of my red and add it to the water in my palette. And even though it's still fairly soaked into the paper, it's pretty easy to see that this is that I'm getting some difference at least within the tints of my red. Now I move on to the hue. I want this to be the most saturated that I've used so far. So I'm just going to add a little bit of pigment up into where I'm mixing, or a little bit of water, excuse me. I'm going to get a couple good swishes into my red paint. Really work on saturating it, getting a nice vibrant red, but I don't want it to be sticky. Watercolor should be transparent and watery. It should never, ever, ever be sticky. And then we'll see what I get here. I'm going to add a little more pigment here. The other nice thing about watercolor is I can layer it because it is watery. So even where it's dried, I can still take some of this red and go back over it one more time. Real careful. This paper does not like to be scrubbed. It's not good watercolor paper. We're just trying to get to know the media. And so all that, I've used water and one hue, and I've got 4 different shades of red. And we'll see how those do when they lighten up if I need to go over them again. In the meantime, I'm going to begin moving on to my shades. So again, I'm going to add a little bit more water so I know I have enough paint to fill the space. I'll add some more red to it. Get it good and saturated in the container up here. Now I'm going to take a little bit, tiny bit of black, and I'm going to begin working my way down into the shades. So just a tiny bit of black really changed that. As I fast forward here, notice that I added more of my pigment in to make sure that I had the right saturation. And I'm going to keep working like this for these last 2 shades, adding a little bit of black, making sure that I have enough paint and saturated paint there. But I'll fast forward for you so you don't have to watch me do the whole thing. And there you have it. I'm going to take one more second here with my paper towel, and I'm going to wipe out any leftover wet paint so that that is ready for the next color that might need to be mixed there. There you have it. Happy painting. See you next time.